week I'm going to be concentrating on the planet Saturn. And Saturn, and like every other planet, has something that we call in astrology its generic cycle. So that's very technical. You don't have to remember this. But generic means, because there is another one called individual, generic is like we take that planet on its own and we think of it like, how long does it take it to go around the full circle? And for Saturn, that's 30 years. And then we follow it as it does that based on its original place. So let's say you were born with Saturn in Virgo or Libra, wherever. Saturn was somewhere in the zodiac when you were born. And this is called its natal position, its position at birth. And then it continues moving. Yes, you were born in that moment, but it still follows its course. And it will take it 30 years to go back to where it was when you were born. And we call this a full Saturn cycle. And it's the same with all the other planets. But today it will be Saturn. But when it does that, there will be a certain point where it will be exactly opposite the place where it was when you were born. And there will be two other main points, turning points, when that planet will be 90 degrees from it, and again 90 degrees from it. But these 90 degrees are different from each other. The first one is after it was conjunct, you were born, and then after 1/4 of that cycle, it went to what we call the first quarter, or the waxing square. And then the other one is after the middle, when it was traveling from the middle of the cycle to the next new cycle. It's the last quarter, or the waning square. So these are waxing and waning. I will be repeating them a lot. Don't try to remember them, but this is just like why I wanted to make it clear that they're different. They're not the same. And you see how when we travel around Saturn, and Saturn, I will skip a little bit forward so that you finally see what I'm talking about today, is like a clock measuring the human life and the most important stages of the human life. And I will be running you through those stages, and you see what happens in these ages. They're all the same for all of us, because the generic cycle is an age factor. It happens, so certain things happen to us at 30 because we're 30, not because we have that particular chart. Yeah? And at the same time, there is another cycle of Saturn, which is in the chart itself, and that's very much more individual, and it's more specific for everybody. But what I'm going to talk to you about today is general for everyone, but it will come out slightly different, again, depending on the chart. Okay? So, before we do the actual cycle of Saturn and the ages and things, I want to tell you what is Saturn about in astrology, just very briefly. It is one of those planets that has bad reputation, that some of astrologers will say it's the malefic, it's the bad planet, the one that causes trouble, causes bad events happening. Please forget about all of this. That's not true. That's exaggeration at most. Because yes, that's the planet of discipline, structure, boundaries, limitations. That's all correct. But that's also the planet that gives us the chance to grow and to develop and to learn something through hardship most of the time, not through very easy and easygoing experiences like another one, Jupiter. Jupiter and Saturn are like complete opposites, where Jupiter expands and make us feel like there are so many opportunities out there and something more positive is expected. Then Saturn has the opposite effect. Saturn is one of the two societal planets. It's the one that determines where were we born, with what parents, in what country, in what culture, and how they would define us, but how they would limit us more than how they would what resources they would give us. Yes, they would also give us the resources, but Saturn is not negative, because we all need some sort of structure and order in order to function, in order to not get completely lost, which is what can happen with the other one, Jupiter, which is so expansion oriented. The one that governs Sagittarius, by the way, is Jupiter. That it may just burst, all that energy and all that expansion. If Saturn is not there to contain it, it's a function, as you now probably already figured it out. Saturn is one of the many psychological functions in all of us, and that's the one that's connected to the situation, they call it the Lord of the Karma sometimes, because it's the past that we have inherited from all the previous generations, like a sum total of all the conditions and everything that happened. And we don't know the details about this, but the kind of Saturn we were born with is always in a sign, always in a house, and there we feel in one way or another restricted and frustrated, and we feel like we have to work harder than normal, than usual. It's also the one that governs time, the concept of time. Human beings are the only ones that have that realization of what that time is limited, even though it's subjective. Some people feel like 5 years pass much quicker than others, and it's very important in what part of life as well. But the concept of time is also in the area of Saturn, and also that's a restriction. It's our awareness of a restriction. An animal doesn't know that it's got a certain number of years to live. Only we do, which is one of the reasons this planet is causing periods of depression, periods of feeling down and feeling lost, and search of meaning. But it's actually also the one that can give us the meaning, because it can define and really focus a certain set of things that we will be concentrating on, giving us a chance to choose them and to grow from the conditioning of very early years when we were born among certain situation, and choose our own path later in life, again limiting us, unfortunately. This planet is one that teaches patience, tradition. Is the traditional planet. Is the one of convention, of the status quo. When somebody is born, they get their name, their you can function within the limits of that name and that position in society. And later on, you can work, choose your profession, and then again, that's limiting you in one way or another. It teaches self-control. It teaches discipline, which is something that's not very positive probably for most of us, but that's where we get results through the concept of Saturn. It's also the father image in astrology. Like that god Kronos in mythology, that's Saturn actually. And also Satan is Saturn. I don't know if you know that, but the association is there. The weekday to which Saturn corresponds, and every planet corresponds to a weekday. I don't know if you know that. Is Saturday, Saturday. Um, the Day of the Dead is Saturday, where we honor our predecessors, and it's something overlapping here between the karma, the predecessor. It's certain information can be taken from the position of Saturn about where do we come from, what has happened before, and also it governs all the structures of the body. It's an earth. Capricorn is an earth sign, and all earth signs are about real objects and something that's tangible from the senses, with the senses. So the skeleton and the bones are also the area of Saturn and Capricorn, because we are limited in our body by its structure. We can go outside of our skeleton. That's more or less this meaning.